August 2025, Sahel region, northern Burkina Faso. The sand burns hotter than asphalt. The sky, pale and merciless, hangs like a curse. In the distance, a boy drags a jerrycan across cracked clay, his footsteps tracing a country's most precious currency, water. But there is none. Just heat, dust, and silence. Then came the order. Bury it. Millions of gallons. Not oil, not gold. Salt water purified, treated, and injected deep beneath the dunes. Gone, hidden, on purpose. To the outside world, it looked insane. To the thirsty, it looked cruel. But to Ibrahim Traoré, president of a landlocked nation choking on drought, it was something else entirely. It was war. Because in Burkina Faso, rain is not seasonal, it's political. Less than 600 millimeter a year. No ocean, no glacial source, no sympathy from the sky. And every well becomes a front line. Villagers against villagers, corporations against farmers, soldiers against despair. One spill can kill a harvest. One dry month can starve a region. So why hide water when the country bleeds for it? That's what baffled international observers. But Traoré wasn't playing by colonial logic. His answer came not through speeches, but through pumps, pipelines, and sand. It came through a directive marked Classified 44B. A sovereign water doctrine written not in ink, but in brine. Project Silent Reservoir. Thousands of barrels of desalinated water buried under layers of treated sand, wrapped in hydrophobic membranes, protected from evaporation, theft, and war. Monitored by AI systems built in Ouagadougou, powered by solar microgrids, invisible to satellite reconnaissance. No IMF funds, no UN blueprint, no French contractors. Only Burkinabe youth engineers under 30, trained in Agra and Addis Ababa, guided by a single doctrine: water is not charity, it is sovereignty. The West called it wasteful, reckless. But Traoré called it preparation. He saw what the world ignored. Water will soon cost more than oil. Rivers will spark wars, crops will collapse, and the nations that buried water, not money, will be the ones that rise. Still, questions remain. Is it accessible? Who controls the valves? Can a country facing famine afford to hide its lifeline? And more urgently, what happens when the thirsty realize salvation is buried just beneath their feet? You don't see the crisis at first glance, but you feel it. The taps cough, wells run dry. In the north, villagers dig with bare hands for hours just to find a muddy sip. In the south, cattle collapse along dried riverbeds, bones jutting through hide. On the outskirts of Ouagadougou, mothers boil rainwater scraped from corrugated roofs, if it rains at all. And still, the mercury rises. In 2025, Burkina Faso recorded less than 740 millimeters of rain, its lowest in a decade. Some provinces, like Oudalan and Tapoa, barely scraped 500 millimeter, far below survival thresholds. Crops failed, pastures turned to ash, cholera spiked. This isn't just drought, it's slow collapse. And it's getting faster. Decades of climate stress, desertification, and chaotic rainfall have pushed this landlocked nation to the edge. The United Nations calls the Sahel one of the world's most climate-vulnerable regions. But for Burkinabe farmers, that's not a headline, it's breakfast. No water means no food. No food means no future. Entire communities are vanishing. Between 2018 and 2024, more than 1.6 million people were displaced, some by violence, but many by thirst. In the dry corridor between Kaya and Fada and Gorma, entire villages have emptied. Their fields have withered. Their children have stopped school to fetch water 20 kilometers away. And the urban centers aren't spared. Ouagadougou's water treatment plants, dependent on surface runoff, operate at 30% below demand. The capital's population has nearly doubled in 15 years, but its water infrastructure hasn't kept pace. The result? Rationing, unrest, black markets. Burkina Faso, once self-sufficient in food staples, now relies on grain imports from Ghana, Benin, and beyond a geopolitical weakness Traoré has repeatedly warned about. If the rains continue to fail, the country risks becoming a permanent humanitarian zone ruled by aid trucks and foreign contracts. That's the nightmare Traoré saw. And that's why the water was buried. Because he knew the math. If Burkina Faso stays dependent on rainfall, it dies. Not in one day, but in waves. First crops, then livestock, then people, then hope. He called it openly the silent genocide of climate neglect. And behind closed doors, officials used a different term, hydro-exodus. The mass displacement of millions, not by bombs, but by dust. Not by warlords, but by weather. So what do you do when the clouds betray you? When rivers vanish and aquifers retreat? You dig. Not for oil, but for water. And then you hide it from the storm. Because in the coming decades, the most powerful weapon a nation can hold may be a map of where the last clean water lies buried. But what happens when other nations realize that Burkina Faso, one of the poorest countries on earth, may already be holding that map? Boom. The pump hissed, valves sealed, water disappeared into the sand. Not lost, stored. Not wasted, preserved. Not forgotten, weaponized. In the eyes of Ibrahim Traoré, this was not engineering, it was doctrine. Because to him, water isn't charity, it's sovereignty. Burkina Faso, 2025. A country where every gallon is a negotiation, where rivers don't flow, they vanish, where foreign companies bid for drilling rights like prospectors bidding for diamonds. In this harsh calculus of survival, Traoré made a declaration that stunned his cabinet and shook the donor class. Water is not just for drinking, it is the foundation of national independence. It wasn't a metaphor, it was policy. Written into Directive AGXS 1025, he codified what no other African leader dared say out loud: water belongs to the state, and it must be protected like uranium, gold, or oil. That's why the water went underground. Burkina Faso's temperatures are climbing. Evaporation rates have jumped by over 16% in the last decade. Conventional reservoirs lose billions of liters to open-air heat. So, Traoré ordered a radical shift: subsurface hydration bunkers using desalinated brine stored beneath engineered dunes, insulated with triple-layer geomembrane shielding. The science is real. The symbolism, even more so. He compared it to the way the French guard their nuclear fuel, to the way the Saudis manage oil beneath the Rub al Khali desert. Only this time, it wasn't for export. It was for Burkinabe children who may one day be born into a world without clouds. And he said it without blinking. If we don't act today, our children will die of thirst tomorrow. And it won't be because God failed us. It will be because we failed to prepare. To Traoré, burying water wasn't burying hope. It was preserving the right to survive without permission. And in doing so, he challenged the entire global water narrative. That Africa must beg for it, import it, or watch it trickle down in the form of aid. This vision sparked outrage in boardrooms from Brussels to Geneva. Water, to them, was a commodity. To him, it was a line in the Constitution. And so, while foreign contractors proposed more aid-funded dams, Traoré built microcatchments, gravity-fed storage spheres, and sealed reservoirs immune to sabotage, sun, and speculation. His goal wasn't to be praised by donors. It was to ensure that Burkina Faso would never again need them. Some call it paranoia, others call it prophetic. But ask yourself, in a century where climate is currency, what is more valuable than the ability to create your own rain beneath your own feet? It started with the sound of shovels. Then came concrete. Then water trapped, not lost. Across the drylands of Burkina Faso, valleys once cracked and scorched are now rimmed with levees, hillsides carved into catchments. And in the heart of rural provinces from Bouclé du Mahun to the Sahel region, an unrelenting campaign is unfolding. Hundreds of small and mid-sized dams, rising quietly but decisively. They don't look like mega-projects. There are no flashy ribbon cuttings, no IMF billboards, no foreign consultants in SUVs, but these dams, modest, strategic, and hyper-local, are saving Burkina Faso one raindrop at a time. The strategy is simple, but the logic is revolutionary. Don't chase the river, catch the rain. In a country where rainfall is erratic and short-lived, Traoré's government has shifted its entire national water policy. Under Program FST 4.2, launched in 2023, over 318 microdams and retention basins have been built or restored in just 24 months. Their purpose? Catch floods before they destroy, store water before it escapes, recharge aquifers before it's too late. Engineers call it managed surface retention with vertical infiltration, but to farmers in Koudougou and Yatenga, it just means the corn grows again. And it's working. Rain that once vanished within hours now stays, seeps, sinks. Underground water tables, previously in freefall, have begun to stabilize. Local agriculture, once paralyzed by drought, is rebounding. Dry season farming is back. Women's cooperatives are planting tomatoes in October. Millet fields shine green in November. Goat herders no longer trek 30 kilometers for a trough. The impact goes beyond agriculture. Dams reduce flood damage in lowlands. They replenish wells. They support solar-powered irrigation grids, spreading water equity to regions long neglected. In some cases, village yields have doubled within a single cycle, according to the National Water Agency's July 2025 report. But here's the deeper layer. These dams aren't just tools, they are territorial claims. Each concrete wall is a declaration. This water stays here. Each reservoir is a refusal. We will not depend on aid when the skies fail. Because make no mistake, water is now a geopolitical chess piece. Across West Africa, global firms are buying water access the way they once bought mines. Climate bonds, water futures, patented filtration tech. But Traoré's Burkina Faso is building something they can't own. A grassroots water grid immune to speculation. This is not just engineering. This is a form of resistance. Rain is no longer a gamble. It's an asset, and the Burkinabe are holding on to every drop. But as the country catches its own rain, stores its own future, and buries its own lifeline beneath layers of sovereignty, a troubling question remains. What happens when those who profit from water scarcity realize that Burkina Faso is no longer thirsty nor for sale? The drill stopped. The reading came in, and silence fell. Beneath the sandstone of Burkina Faso's ancient crust, deeper than any river, older than any map, lay a secret reservoir. Not of oil, not of gas, but of something far rarer in this parched nation. Fossil water. Formed 10,000 to 40,000 years ago, locked underground since the last ice age. Untouched, unsullied, unrenewable. In 2024, government geologists confirmed what had long been whispered in mining corridors and village legends. Vast non-renewable aquifers sit buried beneath the northern plateau stretching from Dori to the fringes of Djibo. Trapped between impermeable rock layers, these ancient waters are immune to drought, but also to replenishment. They are a finite inheritance. If you drink it all, it never comes back. That's how President Ibrahim Traoré put it. And then he added, "Don't spend your ancestors' fortune without leaving a single coin for your children." The message wasn't poetic. It was strategic. In a region where rainfall is fickle and seasonal rivers dry within days, fossil water might seem like a miracle. But for Traoré, it was a warning disguised as a gift. Yes, this water could save lives, but if abused, it could end futures. That's why his administration imposed strict controls under Decree 23004B, capping extraction volumes and linking any deep aquifer access to long-term sustainability offset clauses. Villages tapping fossil reserves are required to concurrently develop surface catchment systems or solar desal projects, ensuring every drop extracted is matched by investment in replenishment or technology. It's a balancing act. Life today versus life tomorrow. Emergency use versus generational equity. Traoré's vision goes further. He's labeled fossil water a strategic, non-replenishable asset, placing it legally alongside Burkina Faso's gold and uranium reserves. Unauthorized drilling now carries the same penalty as illegal mining: seizure of equipment, criminal prosecution, and full reparations. Critics say it's overregulation, but supporters call it environmental statesmanship. In a world where even freshwater is traded as a commodity, Traoré is making a stand few dare. Water is not a product, it is a legacy. Still, the temptations remain. Droughts will intensify. Donors may dangle infrastructure in exchange for access. And as neighboring nations begin to tap their own ancient reserves, pressure will mount. Why not pump more? Why not sell some? Why wait for tomorrow when today is on fire? But that's the moral test of fossil water. Will Burkina Faso defend what cannot be replaced, or follow the path of nations that sold their future by the barrel? Steel doors slammed open, pumps ignited, and ocean water began its 800-mile journey inland. Not fiction, not theory. Burkina Faso, one of the most landlocked nations on Earth, was now drawing water from the sea. In April 2025, President Ibrahim Traoré did the unthinkable. He signed 2 parallel treaties with Guinea and Côte d'Ivoire, granting Burkina Faso permanent access to the Atlantic not for trade, but for water. Under the terms of the agreement, pipelines from Bokeh, Guinea, and San Pedro, Ivory Coast, will channel raw seawater into newly built desalination corridors, stretching eastward like arteries across the Sahel. The first of these projects, Corridor Blue, has already broken ground. Located just outside Benfora, near the Ivorian border, it hosts Burkina Faso's first high-pressure reverse osmosis plant, capable of transforming 100,000 gallons of seawater per day into drinkable, mineral-balanced freshwater. The cost? High. The risk? Enormous. The energy demand? Massive. And yet, Traoré looked straight into the camera and said, "Life has never been cheap, and if there is a cost to secure it for our children, then let us be the ones who pay it." This wasn't just a desalination project, it was a defiance of geography. Burkina Faso has no coast, no river ports, no direct maritime rights. But through strategic diplomacy, legal innovation, and bilateral cooperation, the country now owns water corridors protected by international law, functionally turning saltwater into a sovereign import, immune from aid conditionalities or IMF bottlenecks. Critics were quick to condemn the move as impractical, unsustainable, expensive, but engineers from India and Algeria, nations with decades of desert water experience, were brought in. Solar farms were scaled up to power the plants, salt byproducts were channeled into industrial reuse, and villages near the new lines began to see what they hadn't in decades: clean, reliable water in the middle of a dry season. This is where policy meets symbolism. Because Traoré isn't just quenching thirst, he's building a new map of Africa. One where landlocked doesn't mean powerless. One where water doesn't wait for clouds. One where sovereignty is measured not by the size of a navy, but by the ability to make the sea drinkable across borders. And once again, the world watches. The UN calls it ambitious. The World Bank calls it fiscally concerning. But the people of Dano, Gawa, and Leo call it something else. A miracle they never thought they'd live to see. Still, one question ripples louder than any pump or turbine. If a landlocked nation can turn salt water into independence, what excuse do the rest of us have? No water in the sky, no river on the map, but something moves beneath their feet. In the dry belly of Burkina Faso, beneath fields once abandoned to dust and cracked soil, a new sound hums just below the surface. Not thunder, not rain, but pressure, high-pressure pumps, moving desalinated seawater across hundreds of miles, silently and invisibly. They call it the invisible river, born from salt, engineered through steel. It's not visible from satellites. It doesn't shimmer like the Nile or roar like the Amazon. But under the red clay of West Africa, a man-made subterranean artery now flows from Banfora to Kaya, from Ouagadougou to the borders of Niger. The concept defied logic when it was first announced in late 2024. A desert nation with no coast, building a vast network of buried pipes to circulate desalinated water across provinces? Even allies raised eyebrows. But Traoré didn't flinch. Backed by bilateral water access agreements with Guinea and Côte d'Ivoire, and funded through a mix of African Development Bank bonds, India-Burkina tech credits, and sovereign wealth energy offsets, the project now spans over 1,200 kilometers of underground pipe, reinforced with thermoplastic polymer shielding and protected by national security law. Its function? Everything. The invisible river feeds irrigation hubs in the center-south. It fills emergency tanks in refugee zones near Djibo. It powers hydroponic farms in Koudougou and cools biomedical labs in Bobo Dioulasso. Even the data center of Koudougou, host of Burkina's new sovereign cloud, draws from it water recycled in closed-loop cooling systems. But this is more than infrastructure. This is myth turned mechanism. A dry nation that summoned its own underground river, not through prayers, but through policy. Not by begging the clouds, but by bending science and diplomacy to its will. In classrooms, students recite its specs like scripture. In mosques and markets, it's praised not as a miracle but as proof. Proof that sovereignty is no longer a speech. It is measurable in meters of buried pipe, in the pressure of valves, in liters per second. Traoré framed it perfectly during a national broadcast in July 2025. Some nations were born with rivers. We built ours, beneath the sand, for our children, for the next century. But beneath that pride simmers a question, and not just for Burkina Faso. If the world can engineer a river in the middle of a desert, what else have we been told is impossible, simply because it was inconvenient to build? The wind howls across the Yatenga plains. Dust rises. The sun glares like a furnace overhead. On the surface, there is nothing but scorched earth and silence. A landscape etched by centuries of heat and hardship. but below something else. A river, unseen, artificial, unyielding, flowing beneath Burkina Faso's feet, like a lifeline, carved in steel and vision. This is not fiction. This is Burkina Faso, in 2025, a landlocked country with no coast, no Great Lakes, no mighty river, yet now home to a man-made water grid more advanced than many coastal nations. It begins with desalination plants on the Atlantic. It ends with irrigation valves in the Sahel. In between, thousands of kilometers of pipe, dozens of pump stations, underground reservoirs, digital flow controls. All built, not by accident, not by charity, but by choice. By design, by sovereignty. President Ibrahim Traoré stood before the nation this August and delivered a statement historians may one day quote as a turning point. We did not wait for the clouds. We did not wait for permission. We did not wait for aid. We acted. This is not just a new water system, this is a revolution. It's a revolution measured not in protests or slogans, but in liters per second. In solar-powered desal units. In farmland, once abandoned now blooming with crops. But more than that, it is a philosophical rupture, a rejection of the old narrative that Africa must wait, suffer, and receive. Burkina Faso chose to build, to engineer, to own. And in doing so, it offers a challenge to the world. If a landlocked nation with limited funds, scarred by drought and conflict, can lead a water revolution, what excuse remains for the rest of us? This isn't just a national story, it's continental. Across the Sahel, across sub-Saharan Africa, young engineers are studying what Burkina just proved, that climate is not destiny. That with political will, scientific resolve, and legal independence, even the desert can be bent to serve life, not erase it. This is the dawn of something deeper than infrastructure. It's the rise of a doctrine. Water is not just a need, it is a right, a resource, a weapon, a flag. And so, in the face of climate collapse, Burkina Faso made a decision few imagined possible. To bury its water underground, and with it, the fear of dependence. It is not a miracle. It is not luck. It is courage engineered into policy. So now, as the rest of the world stares at rising temperatures and dwindling rainfall, one question echoes louder than any storm. If they can do it, what's stopping us? If this story moved you, save the video, share it, leave a comment. Because somewhere out there, a young engineer or farmer is listening, and they may be the next to turn dust into water.